just started.
Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for those of you who are joining us. For those maybe who aren't from Westfield, I am Mayor Shelley Brindle, and so we're thrilled that you're able to join us for this hopefully informative webinar today. The genesis of this conversation started from a conversation with the folks that you see in front of you, who I'll introduce in a minute. We were just talking about what the world looks like and what communities will look like in a post-COVID world. And the conversation got so interesting, and clearly we have a bunch of thought leaders here. We felt like this is something that the public should be hearing too. So we just decided, let's just do a Facebook Live and kind of bring that conversation to the public so you can hear kind of what we're thinking, really, I think, as I said, these are thought leaders in terms of where the future is going. So we really wanted to have the public get the benefit of this conversation. So I'll kick it off with a few introductions, beginning with Richard Heaps. Richard Heaps is the Senior Vice President at Streetworks Development. Some of you may have seen Richard give a presentation at the Westfield Town Council meeting a couple weeks ago. Streetworks Development is a fairly recently acquired subsidiary of Hudson's Bay Company, which is the property owner of the Lord & Taylor in Westfield, which encompasses about 7 acres in our downtown. Streetworks is a nationally recognized planning and redevelopment firm, and Hudson's Bay and Richard Baker had the foresight to acquire them to actually work on the imagination of their many retail properties. Richard in particular is a real thought leader, as I mentioned, having worked on communities and main streets all over the country. I think most notably and relevant to a lot of us is the Blueback Square development in West Hartford, Connecticut, is a Streetworks project that Richard led. And more recently, and I think probably with a lot more complexity, Streetworks was responsible for the development of the $2 billion redevelopment downtown Detroit, which has been a major success story, as those of you are familiar with it. So thank you for being here, Richard.
Thank you.
Here also is, I don't know where everybody is on everybody's screen, but is Phil Abramson. Phil is the founder and CEO of Topology, which is an incredible planning firm here in Westfield. Phil is incredibly overeducated for his role, but he brings lots of degrees to, I think, being really adding a lot of depth to the conversation, including, I was impressed by your criminal justice background from Rutgers. That's quite amazing. Also a master's in city and regional planning from the Blaustein School, and also a law degree from the Rutgers School of Law in Newark. And he is based in Newark, and he does work in Morristown and Summit and South Orange and places all over New Jersey, which I'm going to let Phil talk about in a bit. But he brings a great statewide perspective at the forefront of redevelopment. And lastly, and very importantly, is the Westfield Town Planner, Don Samet. Hopefully many of you tuned in to the Facebook Live he and I did several weeks ago, just to kind of give, I think, a 101 on redevelopment. And we are incredibly fortunate to have Don in his role as the town planner of Westfield. Not only has he been here for several years, but prior to that, he led a lot of the redevelopment efforts in Asbury Park, prior to that in Montclair, and he brings a lot in the breadth of these experiences to this conversation today. So Don is going to be able to bring a lot of these big conversations home to really what these things can mean for our community. So are we ready to get started?
You bet.
All right, so thank you all for being here. I'm looking forward to lively conversation. So I want to begin, as I said, this conversation really started when we're talking about COVID and what the world is going to look like and what trends are going to be permanent post-COVID. And it really, every crisis brings opportunity. And I think that we are really, we are looking at, a transformational need in our downtown in Westfield prior to COVID. And I think what COVID has actually created an opportunity for us to really reimagine what that could look like. So Richard, why don't we start with you talking about some historical context for pivots that you have been, that you're familiar with and looked at, and things that maybe have changed courses. And I'm gonna, bear with me all while I'm going to share my screen. Let me, all right, hang on, I just did this and my share screen went away. Here we go, sorry, there we go.
There we go.
All right, and hold on, I'm gonna make it big so we can, uh, how's this?
There we
And-
go.
All right,
Um,
here we go.
Not too bad. So, when we first talked about this, the word pivot kept coming up. And how are we going to, what are we going to pivot to when this era is over? And as Phil and others know, I usually talk about whatever book I'm reading. So my Christmas suggestion for the year is for anyone interested, read the book Metropolis by Ben Wilson. Just came out. It's a history of the city as an idea, as a thing. And Ben uses a phrase that I thought I made up, I'm wrong, but that the city is really humankind's greatest invention. It was before the wheel and a million other things, and it has. And so, what we're really talking about is living together in an urban way, whether it's a city, a town, or a village. And so, what's so fascinating, there's nothing new. We have been living in a sea of change since our beginning, 4,000 years BC. And so I said, okay, let's start this little uh, thinking with the recognized first city in the world. And it's Uruk. It was about 3800 BC. And here's what I found was so interesting. It lasted a while and then it went away. And I said, well, it went away? What the hell happened? And it was this thing called climate change. So even back since our beginning, when climates would change in Mesopotamia, what would happen is rivers would change scope. A city had been built along a river, it would change, it would dry out, it would lose its water. Now, in this case, Uruk's River moved about 12 miles. So it's not like, oh my God. But in fact, 12 miles really changed the course of history, and it became a desert in the Middle East. So I'm like, well, this is so interesting to me. Cities have always been changing. And one of the reasons they're called mankind's greatest invention is that change is what drives new ideas, drives innovations, drives new ways of doing things, because it's always in flux, always in change. And that's how I'd like us to think about right now is, yes, we're changing, we're in flux. What are we going to learn? What are we going to invent? How are we going to think of things? And that's kind of the attitude that would be, I think, the right thing to have now instead of a victim type attitude. And the next slide, so I got to thinking, okay, that's the first city in the world. Let's look at the first city in America, which is also very, very interesting. This is Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I want everybody watching and ourselves here, when I say the word Santa Fe, what do you think of? If you've ever been here, there's a place called Governor's Palace, which was first created in 1609. Rather a long, that's even older than Westfield. And what's interesting and you see on the left there is a very old picture of what's called Governor's Palace and the plaza in Santa Fe. And this is what it looked like when it was built. Santa Fe at that time, or during the time that it was used through the 1800s, was a Victorian city and had kind of a Victorianness about it. Yes, it did have the Pueblo ruins, etc. And an amazing thing happened when the town or the city decided to renovate and reestablish this palace. They assigned some architects to it, and the architects, most amazingly, changed its look to what you see on the right. This was in 1909. And they worked on that for about 30 or 40 years. So they were doing it very carefully, very consciously. And something happened in 1957, which is pretty close to how old I am. They created the first historic district. in the country designated and said, we want every building in downtown Santa Fe to look like what's on the right. If you wanted to use today's terms, you would say that would be their brand. And that, I guarantee, if you thought about Santa Fe, an image like that probably came into your mind when I said, think of Santa Fe, because now today, almost every building in town is required to get a permit using this basic brand vocabulary. Now, why is that interesting to me? Well, it was conscious. Even in the 50s, they said, this is who we are. This is who we want to be. This is Santa Fe. And so if you're going to be in Santa Fe, you're going to be like us, not the other way around. And if you're a Kentucky Fried Chicken or a Shell oil gas station, they have all these things, but they look like Santa Fe. And so that's really the issue, is you can, as a community, I believe, make decisions that affect who you are on your own. And in essence, that's what we're talking about doing when we do the master plan, is to be quintessentially Westfield. And how do you do that? Now, I just have two other quick slides just because I like them when we talk. So that's a pivot that affected Santa Fe in perpetuity. If you would do the next slide, my two favorite slides are very close to each other in New York and are very rich in thinking about pivots. I live in New York City, about a block from Times Square, so I will admit I'm fascinated by its history because it has two histories. It did a pivot down in a certain period of time at the beginning of this century around not just streets and blocks, but around entertainment, a number of uses, and went kind of in the gutter, if you want to think of it, or certainly invented a lot of stuff. And then it came back in the late 80s and 90s. What is interesting to me about it, they didn't change really any buildings. They added advertisement and screens and whatever, but they're the same buildings. They're pretty much today as it was then, streets and blocks. But they rebalanced the car to pedestrian to open space formula. They didn't add any more lanes. They just made it work better, as you see in the middle, from my perspective, and fundamentally changed the direction and the character of these blocks in New York City. This was also a conscious decision based on how the character had degraded. So these were conscious choices that people made. I think the newer is better than the old, but I could make the case the other way. But these are pivots that had a huge impact on character and value. Real estate value went up, and not just real estate value, social value, economic value, financial, all of it. And so really the changes weren't that enormous. And I end with the following one, which is kind of the son and daughter of Times Square, which is the High Line in New York, which is really most interesting because it was a train that really decreased in use with the advocacy of trucking and delivering our goods through trucks, not trains. I show it, it's a favorite place, but the most interesting thing is Rudy Giuliani's last act as mayor of New York City, 1999, was to sign the demolition of the High Line. That was only 20 some years ago, if you can imagine. And if you've been down there, the impact once again on social value, on real estate value, on character, on New Yorkness is extraordinary. So I just show you these to kind of say, let's be careful as we're thinking about our future, that we're looking at things in the right way and looking at the kinds of things that can add social value and real estate value and financial value in a Westfield way. And that's
Thank
just a
you,
quick
Richard.
history.
And it requires obviously a tremendous amount of imagination and vision and leadership. I don't think anybody could have really thought about the High Line now being such an incredible tourist destination. Well, it will be again, but it's quite remarkable.
And what's important, it was started by two guys.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
You know, two private citizens who started just pushing in this direction.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, well, let's bring it to New Jersey. And Don, you could talk a little bit about, I think many of us, including me, have become huge fans of Asbury Park. And it's like the transformation is just incredible over where it was 20 years ago. And I know you had a front row seat at that. So maybe you can share your experience there.
Sorry, I was still on mute there. Yeah, this is really one of my favorite community-based planning stories. I'm very fortunate to be a part of this. Similar to what Richard was talking about, it was an opportunity that arose where the community really took that opportunity to determine its future. And similarly, I think that's where Westfield is in a lot of ways. Especially thinking about the post-COVID world, which we're talking about today. But in Asbury Park, this is actually on the western side of the city, not at the waterfront. There was Springwood Avenue, a historic commercial corridor. It was a regional draw for shoppers as well as entertainers. The likes of Ike and Tina Turner performed in clubs along the avenue. It was really a strong economic driver for the entire city as a whole, and especially the western part of the city. Well, civil unrest of the early 70s really hit the avenue hard, and what was left was a lot of vacant land, and you see that on the screen now, all of that vacant land along the avenue. There were starts and stops in redevelopment. You can see on this aerial, there's some housing, which is outside of that red outline. There are some townhomes as well, just off of the avenue that were built. So, urban renewal happened partially. Some things were done. And then here comes the 2000s. And another opportunity came about for some funding for some additional housing. For years, the community is being shown housing, urban renewal. The community didn't want it. They said stop, right? They said pause. They wanted to build on that avenue's strong history of commercial and entertainment uses and really fill the gaps on what was missing along the avenue. Can we go to the next slide? So here you can see that the community really started to think out what they wanted. We knew they wanted, or they told us they wanted public space.
Oh, sorry. I'm getting a little, there we go.
They wanted public space. They wanted a variety of housing options, and they wanted commercial space. So a committee was formed. There was a lot of good grassroots planning work performed, and we took what was vacant land, as we see in the photo to the left, to concept plans, in this case for the park, and if we could go to the next slide, to fruition. A very successful public space, and I think public spaces are going to become more and more important in a post-COVID world. So we have a new park, and if we could go to the next slide, Mayor. We have the photo on the left shows a new mixed-use building, which includes community space, namely a senior citizen center. It includes shared workspace, which the Chamber of Commerce has used, as well as other small businesses. It includes a restaurant that not only it doesn't just serve food, it also acts as a training center for those interested in the hotel and service industries, and includes housing as well. So rather than just put forward what the funding allowed for at a certain time, the community stopped and said, this is what we want, and this is what will benefit our neighborhood and our city. And I believe the success on Springwood Avenue, and it's ongoing, it's an ongoing process, is that it's a community-driven plan. And, you know, we're at a similar point here in Westfield, where we have heard a lot from the community, and I think we'll continue to be sure that whatever happens here is exactly what is the best for us, that we determine our own future. So it was an important pivot point down there. They said, okay, stop, let's look at what we want. And they worked very hard to get it done, and it's become successful.
And that's great, Don. And I think reiterating the public input process and the grassroots process, which is exactly what we're hoping to emulate in Westfield. So, all right, so I'm going to hand it over to Phil. Hang on, as soon as I can find my little arrow. Here we go. And we're going to take it back internationally.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mayor, and thank you so much for everybody and the opportunity to be here. I wanted to talk about, you know, two specific things. One is kind of a international trend, certainly a national trend. It underlied Richard's story about Times Square, and really this whole idea of rethinking the public right-of-way and public spaces in general. For many decades, and as planners, like we're taught and we believe that the automobile has been one of the greatest modern influences on the form, shape, function of towns, cities, and and suburbs, quite frankly. And so what does that actually mean? And for many years, since the 40s and 50s, since the advent of the automobile, we've been on autopilot. No pun intended there, but that we just, the car kind of has a mind of its own. It's this big 2,000-pound hunk of metal. It's large. It needs space. It needs turning radiuses, and the safety becomes the priority when it comes to automobiles, as it should be. But people come second when they have to share space with a car, because they're more vulnerable. They need to be separated on sidewalks. What happened over time is what you see at the top of the screen, and this is Copenhagen, Denmark. Really one of the early places that had to rethink. And what I loved so much about this conversation and the idea of pivots is this concept of self-determination, what some of us might call lemonade from lemons, where the world hands you a challenge, and now how do we actually create a value and create more value for our community as a result of this? Because never good crisis should never go to waste. And the crisis here in the 1970s in Scandinavia and in the whole world was the oil crisis. And United States sort of got through it and continued on our path. But there were other countries like Denmark, like Sweden, like the Netherlands, that took it seriously and said, okay, we need to change the way that we organize ourselves, the way that we get around, the way that we live, because we're so vulnerable to these little whims and energy markets. So they ultimately, created a much more robust pedestrian and bicycle culture as a result of something very negative. So you could see Copenhagen here, that look what it looked like in the old 1950s cars, same exact plaza. And so these were the types of things now, and that as we move ahead in redevelopment planning in the town, you'll hear the grandchildren of the story and as the ideas that we put out there: bicycle lanes, parks and plazas, and shared streets, and Wooners, which we now use as almost an American word, and at least in urban planning circles. That this is one of the genesis of that rethinking of what role should the automobile play in our communities. So this is one story I was happy to share, and the other is one that's near and dear to my heart, and a little closer than Denmark, and that's the Morristown's revitalization story. This is where I'm from originally. It's the community I grew up in, and I remember a day when, like, maybe you could catch a movie at Headquarters Plaza, for those who know, and you're done at 9 o'clock and there's nothing to do. If you're in Morristown now, or maybe a year ago, It's very much alive into, I apologize, well into the evening. And really, how did that happen? How did that start? And it was not an the saying, like, it took 20 years to make an overnight success here. And one of the earliest projects, I've been the planner there for 11 years. This Epstein's project, I call it the Epstein's because of the department store that it replaced, was really the beginning. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned from this. But Morristown story is one where the community, on one hand, community leadership realized that they needed to make changes and they needed to take these properties and get much more out of them. But on the other hand, like sort of what I think is similar to what's happening in Westfield, is that there's so much opportunity out there, and there's so much need out there to empower these properties, empower local businesses, to reinvent and to create better spaces and better places. The Morristown's resurgence coincided with a much broader market movement of luxury housing in downtowns, of resurgence of retail and office now in downtowns. This was the opposite trend, as we all know. Like the shopping malls took over took over the downtowns. Home Depot killed every hardware store, and Morristown was a victim of that, and it ultimately rebuilt itself. One of the things that I've said in the past, and this will be my last comment, is that it's not just development that is the thing. It's part of it, and it is in my opinion, a necessary part of it. That it catalyzes growth, it attracts more investment, it gives confidence to retail storefronts that there is a market here and there's an energy here and there's investment happening here, and that success begets success and investment begets investment. So I think that development is important. I think that the work that Don and Mayor Brindle has done in Westfield in terms of setting the policies and giving a voice to the people is critical. You can't have one without the other. And then the third is the infrastructure and the improvements, and we call the goodies or whatever, the parks, the plazas, the public art, all that stuff needs to come together, and it's that trifecta. And I think that Westfield has everything it will need to get there, and to sort of make the best of this moment. So I appreciate, again, the opportunity to share my piece.
Thank you, Phil. And I think the common theme from everything that you guys shared is a couple things. It's, about public involvement, being the creators of our own destiny. And I think very importantly, looking at things very holistically. And I think quite honestly, in Westfield, we have done a lot of spot development, and we've never taken a step back and taking a look to see how everything fits together. And I think what you mentioned, Phil, is spot on. The public components of plazas and parks and arts have to go hand in hand with the more development proposals. So, and that includes traffic flow and everything. And I think the opportunity in front of us is that we are actually really in a unique position to be able to take that view. And so that leads me to you, Don, and as our town planner. What do you see as the opportunities and needs in Westfield as we face the reality of what you would call our own pivot moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in summary, the biggest opportunity for us is diversification, and it's in the things that really Phil just mentioned, areas of arts and entertainment, community spaces, and then even commercial spaces and housing in our downtown area. And these are really not only an opportunity, but things we need as well. It's not just coming from me. We heard this during the master plan reexamination process as well. And Westfield, we're very lucky in that, it's been called, we have strong bones, right? We can build upon our assets to make these things happen. What are our assets? Well, what have we heard? Why do people move to Westfield? Top 5 reasons: schools, downtown, community character, the quality of life, And number 5 was availability of the train. We have a centrally located walkable downtown, we have mass transit availability, and we have a visual character that is really uniquely Westfield, and that's both in our residential districts as well as our downtown. I'm seeing here our housing market has remained strong. Home improvements certainly haven't stopped during COVID. My office is constantly getting calls from realtors asking if potential purchasers can do this or that to a property, so new residents are still coming in. But like many communities are seeing as well, we're seeing existing residents invest in their property. So nobody's giving up on Westfield. They're vested here and they want to stay here. Another opportunity, if you will, for us, or another big plus for the town, is the Downtown Westfield Corporation. And their importance really shouldn't be underestimated. A downtown advocacy group, I think, is important, and I see the DWC as fulfilling that role. And they're an important link between we'll call it the boots on the ground downtown folks with the municipal government. Other opportunities for us, we do have available space within our downtown, I think, can be designed in a way to meet our needs, can add to the community character, and that provides a great opportunity for us. I think it's important that we're not trying to recreate Westfield. I think communities that do that really aren't being true to themselves. And Westfield has been successful. It's been successful for a reason, and we don't want to undercut those reasons, whatever they may be.
How much have you seen, like, in terms of what have we learned about the shifting demographics of our community, and how significant has that been?
The shifting demographics? Well, I can tell you, the folks like we have a lot of folks that are coming in from the more urban areas in the region. We have, I've spoken to New Yorkers, folks that live in Manhattan that are looking to come to communities like Westfield. And then we have some from Jersey City and Hoboken as well. They seem to be coming just in a general sense when they're looking to get out of the denser environment, but at the same time, they're looking for some of the things that Westfield had. They're looking for that core downtown, and they're looking for transit. And they want to be close to those things and see them as a positive. And I think that desire for those types of amenities, the downtown and transit, extends to not only folks that are moving here, but folks that want to stay in town as well. And it's very important that we plan for those folks, such as seniors, and even keeping our younger generations here when they don't yet have families.
So with that, I'm going to ask Richard a couple things, because you have a more national view about what's happening. And so what post-COVID, I should say COVID trends are here to stay? And from your perspective, where do those opportunities, how do they present themselves for Westfield, and how could we or should we be leaning into them? You're on mute, Richard.
Okay, is that better?
Yep.
So I'll give you a really interesting one that has intrigued me the past 6 months. A great body of my work has been re-enhancing, re-imaging, rethinking about main streets throughout America. And probably the number one thing I've spent my time doing is getting the ability to eat on the sidewalk. Sounds, particularly if you want to have a drink while you're eating. I first attacked this in 1994 in Bethesda, Maryland, Bethesda Row. We studied every eating street from South Beach in Miami to you name it. And it took me, in order to have a cafe under a tree, not adjacent to a store, 7 years to get a permit that allowed me to have a lunch with or without alcohol. I had to change the alcohol history and commission with the Maryland State Assembly, and every jurisdictional notion from the state to the county to the city to whatever. Never mind. How do you write a lease for it? It was an unbelievable thing. You thought I would have been trying to, well, who even knows? So, and we were able in 7 years to take a 6 block area that had about 4 restaurants and get 177 restaurants in that time. And that fueled a success and a positive effort in Bethesda. Now, Westfield, you have been in a PhD school on how do you deal with our open space and sidewalks for the past 9 months. Imagine if you took everything that's learned, and I'm sure, Mayor, you could go on and on and on about it. And we could talk about really, are those the nicest kinds of parklet barriers you could do or whatever? You didn't think about any of that stuff. You were out there doing it. Your restaurateurs were out there doing it. Some things worked, some things didn't work. So take that new knowledge that we all have now. We've seen it. It's not a theory anymore. We can talk about who did it well, who didn't do it well, all the stuff we learned. Now imagine that we take that big U-Haul full of stuff and we think about Quimby Street. How different would we think about Quimby Street? A year ago, it was a street, had some parking, it was kind of wide, didn't really have much going on there. Today, you can have opinions about Quimby as an entertainment place, as a celebration place, as a place to eat food, as a place to share and spread liquor licenses, the millions of ways you can think about Quimby. How do you get from Quimby to its parking? I can just, my head could explode with all the possibilities, most of which don't cost much, if any, money, that could change Quimby Street. Would that be the same old Quimby Street as you've always had in Westfield? Yes and no. So it's the new Quimby Street. That's one example. If you took just everything we've learned in COVID and haven't even thought about, we're all like masters of sidewalk cafes. And I'm a little creepy. I go around New York taking pictures of all this stuff. New York has now moved into its second generation of sidewalk cafes. As they realize they're going to keep them open in the winter time, the most amazing things have been happening. If you could be exposed to the ridiculousness of conversing about having lap blankets, which, by the way, you can have if you take a horse in Central Park, combined with a little bit of heat, guess what you'll find out? Oh my God, in Denmark and whatever, they've been eating outside in the winter for generations. So that's one tiny little bit of post-COVID knowledge that you can see how that would make Westfield, in my mind, new and better and the same. So
Phil, let me ask, just to keep going on that. I think we hear the work from home. Are people going to be commuting again? We talked about, what does that look like? And what do we think is really going to happen? And the other piece, and maybe I'll throw that out to any of you, is that, I find the juxtaposition. I think Westfield was just rated like the #1 real estate market in the country, and you could see it by our like many in New Jersey, but our real estate market is taking off. At the same time, we still have a number of vacant storefronts, and the two of them just don't. There seems to one you should think would support the other. So maybe if you could talk about what you think the work from home and commuting trends are be, and what you think the ultimate retail solution is for our community. And you're on mute.
Sorry. I think like the current answer on a lot of these things is like nobody really knows right now, and that there's a lot of directions that it's likely to head, but that us as planners and that Westfield as a community, that we need to keep our eye on, and be, kind of monitoring these vitals on a monthly basis of transit ridership, of who's going back to work and when. I think that there, I'll speak for myself, I'll speak for my family, like kind of the collection of anecdotes that forms our opinions. That this has in some ways been a blessing. Like being able to take a breather, being able to work from home. I have small children. My parents have now gotten to, having this intergenerational household at times. And they're now, like, I live in Mountainside personally. They're looking in Westfield and Mountainside to be closer to us. So I think that the idea of the family, the idea of the neighborhood, like the people that are close to you in a pandemic are the people that matter. And we now know who's important to us, and we want to be close to them. And I think that we will continue to be, and make our choices around that. So the work from home thing is going to be about national policy and health policy. I think it's going to be about worker preference. We had seen in the old days, you got a job at a big corporation and you went to work every day and you retired and you had your pension and you moved to Florida, and that was the model, right? And wherever that company was, you better get your butt there and be in a seat by 9 a.m. Now, like the balance of powers has changed a little bit. The companies want good talent, and good talent have options, and they have places to go. So they are going to provide flexibility. And I do think that one of the thoughts is that there will be a decentralization, that rather than everybody kind of rushing into New York City every morning and enduring what we've all had as New Jerseyans had to endure, AKA Penn Station, for all those decades. Maybe there will be offices in a place like Westfield or Summit where folks who live out where we live can work. So the idea of an urban office market was just starting to trickle up prior to COVID. It's been put on hold right now because all workplaces are on hold right now. But I think that we could see a big resurgence. I don't think it's going to be the headquarter size offices of the past. I think that we could be moving into a shared office environment. I think that, if you remember WeWork, which was for really individuals and very small businesses, we could end up with a more flexibility. I had a conversation with a very successful entrepreneur last night, and he said, I just don't know what to do anymore. The world is changing so fast. Like, how do we even react anymore to anything? And I spent all night thinking about that, because he's right. And I think that flexibility will be the solution for the time being. That we can't make deep commitments because this world is changing rapidly, and that so if change is the one thing that's certain, then we need to be prepared to change. So I think things like that, things like resident home preferences, about a place, when you've been in your home for 3 months, 4 months, kind of on end, you rethink what's important, and you realize how important your home is and what you need there, and you want as many things there as you can. And I think that my grandparents, as I was growing up, like, they didn't even throw away plastic silverware because they grew up in an era where you don't waste anything. I think the trauma that we've suffered as a society, being kind of taken away from everything that's important to us, we're going to want to make sure that we have a living arrangement that is safe and healthy and clean, and that if we need to stay in a place for a while, that we're going to be comfortable there. So I think that these are some of the things that's going to affect real estate into the future.
So just a couple observations about that. One is the lack of a consistent one-seat ride, which we've been fighting for several years, could be less important if people now have more flexibility, and maybe could make Westfield more desirable as a result. And secondly, a bit of a conundrum for a planner, I would imagine, with so much in flux. How do you plan for that when there's so much uncertainty? And I'm going to actually send that back to Richard. And Rich, I want you to where you've been, responding as a great planner and developer. But what's very important about Streetworks, you're also a property owner. And clearly, Hudson's Bay has made a decision that Westfield is a priority, and it's a place where you're willing to make a significant investment. So you clearly see opportunity here. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you think Westfield is well positioned for success, and how we do move forward to implement some of these things that you guys have just discussed, but maintain the character of our community that Don referenced, that's so important and part of the attraction. So how do you manage to do both?
So, and that's a good question. Remember, one thing happens with change is some things lose their relevance. Talk about that. But the other thing is there's new opportunities that's presented itself. Westfield's spectacularly lucky that you didn't screw it up in the past 30 years like a number of other New Jersey train towns have. Between you and me and everyone on this, I wouldn't want a Cranbrook garage being dropped in the middle of Westfield. Okay, it fixed the parking problem and ruins the town in the middle. So what we're looking at is, let's go back to Uruk. Mankind has been desiring to live in community, and that trend has been going for many hundreds of years. The earth is not populated by 5-acre lots and single-family houses on those 5-acre lots. That is a human thing. And secondly, when you have the opportunity to rethink uses, I think the key word is community. You can change your rent in the New Jersey office space market to 0, and it's still not going to be what people want. You drive there, you park, you walk into a non-distinct building with ribbon windows, you get back in your car to go to lunch at some frickin', it's not a way to live. So the tremendous opportunity that's right now is millions and millions and millions of square feet of office that, because people have an option, they don't have to go to anymore. And so we can rethink how option can be safe post-COVID and bring back community. And you can't renovate all that crap in those office parks. So you are sitting, in terms of opportunity, on the head of a huge thing. And what do people want? They want community and they want authenticity. And whether you like Westfield or not, I like some things, I don't like others. It is authentic. And the great, tremendous opportunity is to add community and authenticity to your daily working environment. Oh, and by the way, living and everything else. So if you just take that attitude, you say, well, wow, there's no office in Westfield. There's some buildings that were used for office, but there's nothing that does that. Same thing on housing. It doesn't mean that what's there is wrong. It just means we're sitting on the tip of a huge iceberg of opportunity. And if we think in those terms, we'll know what the right thing to do is. And so the second thing is, what's the process? Without a doubt, from Times Square to Copenhagen to Santa Fe, it's involving the public. And I know in your master plan process, you're doing that. You did that in the re-exam process. I've never seen another town where I could walk in and say, I'll give you a good example. I was doing the planning for downtown Charlotte, and I would say, well, what do you want to be? Charlatans or Chartalians? What do you want to be? And they would say, I don't know, but we don't want to be Atlanta. Of course, I wanted to say, sorry, too late. You already are. But so the fact that someone like myself could walk into town and say, what do you guys think about this town? And what do you want to be? And blah, blah, blah. And you have that document. I've told many people, it just blows my mind. And now you're going to move that into a master plan. As long as we, whatever, keep doing these things and getting out there, it will be the right thing.
Richard, one thing you talked about at the council meeting, which I got some feedback that resonated with people, was one of the things that we heard in the master plan was the need to diversify our housing stock. And you referenced in that meeting about some opportunities to do that and where you saw like what would fill those gaps. So just, and you also mentioned, and this is a bit of a post-COVID trend, I think, but something that Westfield was already leaning into was wellness. So can you speak a little bit about both of those things and what that would, leaning into those, what that would look like for Westfield?
Well, and it's something I've learned from Westfield. I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere. So maybe I have a higher sensitivity for these things, but a lot of places, you don't really discuss what it would be like to be born someplace, come home, grow up, go to school, be a teenager, go to college, get married, have kids, blah, 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 the whole life cycle. No one evaluates their town as to whether, can I just do that and stay in Westfield? I would maintain that it's almost impossible to find a place where you could grow up, care, and have a Westfield approach to your life and stay in the same town. I think that would be very difficult to do in Westfield. Not impossible, but not a common experience. And why wouldn't you want that? Not saying you have to do it, but why wouldn't you want that? Especially when community is becoming an increasing value, authenticity is becoming an increasing value. So that was a perspective where I just said, you know, by the way, this is a criticism of New Jersey. You're not that much of a diverse collection of communities. Your communities are kind of one-trick ponies, very nice trick ponies, very rich trick ponies, but when you have a different perspective. So my thinking was, as we think maybe about a new downtown, just maybe there's some new models and new ways of thinking of development. One of my favorites is the old grandmother unit on top of the garage, which takes no more land, takes nothing else, provides all kinds of opportunities for young and old. I know that Phil and I have looked at a couple out. Westfield has alleys. How frickin' great, because that's where grandma goes, on top of the garage. So it's ideas like that that are not radical. Yes, the density doubles, but not really. So it's those kinds of thoughts where we say, how can we add to Westfield, not distract? Doesn't mean we're talking high rises and everything else, that just add these modest, nice little layers of growth. And that's how a town goes from being what Westfield is, which is a very luxurious, nice, family-oriented place, and start to push out on the edges a little bit. And maybe mom doesn't have to go to the home. She can live with us. Maybe our kids can evolve to that unit, whatever. That's what fills my mind. It just seems like Westfield's looking to add a little stuff in between the creases. And guess what? Now is the perfect time to think about that, because these are new ways of thinking. And it's just more diverse. And so my mother, you know, has been locked up in a home since COVID. I tried to see her 100 different times. I can't go see her. So how great if she just lived behind my sisters.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thinking.
So before I was going to ask Don, I was saying, before we move to questions for the public, and Don, I'll not to interrupt, I was going to go to you. You've worked in different places. What do you, from your observation, what is unique about Westfield, either in terms of from the community itself? Like, what do you think makes this place different from, you know, Montclair and other places you've been?
Well, it's certainly, we're primarily detached single family homes here in Westfield. We have one core downtown area, and we have sort of satellite commercial corridors, but thankfully they really don't detract from the heart of our downtown. So, you know, another interesting observation is that Westfield's downtown is almost geographically in the center of the community. So it's serving everyone. You don't have one district over here serving one part of town, another district over there serving the other. So we have a heart, I guess you could say, that we can focus on. We don't have to spread ourselves too thin. Also, with that strong, residential backbone that's been used to help build the downtown up, as well as the town as a whole, those areas have really formed what the character of the community is. And I listening to what Richard said about, filling in the gaps, all this single family housing or areas that we have about 10,900 dwelling units in town. 78% of those are in detached single family homes. So we don't have, as Richard was saying, that housing diversity. And I see that I see that lack of diversity is apparent here, maybe so than in other communities. And how do I see it? I've seen board applications for townhomes where they're not permitted by zoning. I've seen requests to build apartments within existing homes for parents, similar to, but not exactly like what Richard mentioned with accessory dwelling units for parents. I get calls from local residents when new housing is going up. How can they get in because they want to stay in town? We had a meeting with a group of senior citizens during the re-examination process. They wanted condominiums and townhomes to move to. They wanted entertainment. They said experiential, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, experiential retail. They wanted a community center and they wanted greater mobility. So I think, there's a combination of things here. One, because we don't have that lack of diversity, we're talking now about housing stock. The opportunity is for us to design that into town appropriately, and we have the availability and the possibility to do that within our downtown area, which is really where those types of housing should be. And they shouldn't be scattered in our single family residential districts and disrupting that character that is so well ingrained or is the heart of the town of Westfield.
And what's interesting about everything you just mentioned, none of that type of housing comes with, say, incremental kids. And I know a lot of people worry about schools, but we don't think the market of this housing is for families. I think still want their homes, say detached homes. I think we just don't have a place to be that comes before that and after that. And so I think that's something to be addressed. So Phil, go ahead, Don.
I was just going to say one interesting statistic, and I pulled this from the re-exam. In Westfield, millennials make up about 12% of the population, whereas nationwide, they're 27% of the population. So why aren't we capturing that demographic? And should we be? Phil, I'm sure will agree that that demographic is looking for downtown environment, and as far as we know, they will continue to.
So Phil, any final observations about anything unique that you've observed through Westfield? And then we'll take a few questions from the public.
And this is not just as my time working as your planner, but just sort of living in the area. You mentioned retail earlier, and I always scratched my head about Westfield, that I always saw retailers there that I only saw in the malls. And it was always struck me because I didn't even know that could happen. Like, you could have a Gap in the downtown, and Banana Republic exists like this, and Lucky Jeans, and some have not made it through all this. But my point is, and when I've started to ask Don and others about like what's up with that, like how did that come to be, that Westfield is blessed with this shopping mall geography. That you're just outside the gaps, where they don't want to be within a few miles of their existing stores, and you're close enough to the parkway where you have all this access. You're close enough to what retailers call rooftops, and they're pretty wealthy rooftops. So how much of those rooftops are spending money outside of Westfield? And you had said that there's this disconnect with this booming housing market and vacancies in the downtown. I think that's something that we're going to need to really put some thought into. I think that in all communities, perhaps especially Westfield, because the possibilities are actually there to rebuild the retail sector in a meaningful way, that part of our planning work post COVID, the losses that we've suffered, beyond the human cost have been in the businesses that people have spent lifetimes to build, and in the pedestrian activity that those things generate and all of that. So I think Westfield has historically been well situated for retail as a regional center. I think it continues to be. And I think that with the right tools, policies, infrastructure, I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but we can re-incubate that sector, in the downtown to create new opportunities for mom and pops all the way up to, national chains.
And that is certainly one of our key objectives as far as any type of redevelopment. So Kim Ford, our public information officer, is on the phone. I don't know, Kim, if there's been any questions that have come in, or that we probably have about maybe 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most.
Hi, Mayor. Yes, we have some great questions, the majority of which are specific to the Lord & Taylor site in terms of suggestions or concerns about what may or may not go on that site, the impact on traffic, circulation, schools, density. So maybe if you wanted to take a moment just to talk about where we are in the process relative to those specific type of questions, then I have some more general ones I can throw at you.
Sure, I'll answer, and then I'll let Richard fill it in. So I get questions like that all the time. People asking me, well, how many units are going in, or what's the parking number? And I can't reiterate enough that there is no plan yet. So there is nothing yet to present to the public to have that react to. We've been going through this process to lay all the groundwork to enable those concepts and plans to be created. Beginning with the master plan reexamination is really, as we said when we passed the redevelopment ordinance, was the framework that really was the instruction manual for any potential developers. And that is what Richard referenced is going to be their guidebook, if you will, for what they could see and envision on the Lord & Taylor properties. But what's been so great about the relationship that we've had with Richard and Streetworks is that they're so willing to be a partner with us and with the whole redevelopment team to look at the town very holistically and make decisions what goes best on the Lord & Taylor properties relative to what would go best elsewhere in the community. So there's going to be a very public driven process where those types of concepts and ideas will be presented to the public exactly for that type of reaction and input and questions to be asked. But I'll hand it, Richard, I don't know if you have anything to add about what your process typically is and how that would unfold.
Well, typically, and this has been true for 20 years, we don't do this in the dark. We don't do it on our own. We have a very key value that if you want something to be quintessentially of its place, you have to involve the people that live and know its place on an hourly basis. That included when we did downtown Detroit. I moved there for 4 years. There's no other way. So that is what will be coming next when the master plan happens, is how do we engage the whole town and including all 10,000 homes and 30,000 people to help curate and craft this thing. We'll do the right things economically to figure out how to afford it or not afford it or encourage it or whatever else. But so that's what you can expect next to us. I'm hopeful that this kind of exercise for a lunch hour can be a part of that effort. It's one of the post-COVID things. The things we've learned is how to Zoom each other. And so we're going to. So just put that in the bag of post-COVID tricks that we're going to continue to. We're going to talk more regularly and more directly.
And just to be clear too, because this is something Don and I covered on the last Facebook, but the master plan process is not finished. The re-examination recommendations obviously came out, and the next step is to translate those recommendations into policy. And that means potential zoning changes, ordinances. We're in the midst of a significant traffic study to understand what is the capacity of our town to what we could manage, and if we want to manage that. And Don, maybe just reiterate a little bit about what that process is and when that is going to be complete. And I only say that is it's hard. Hudson's Bay and Streetworks is awaiting a bit for that process to complete before they move forward on details, because that's going to inform what they're going to be able to do.
So we heard through the re-examination process that people wanted something to happen downtown. They wanted increased commercial activity. They talked about this diversification of housing stock. And within the re-examination, there's actually a whole list of recommendations for downtown Westfield. Well, we knew that if something was going to happen, it's going to impact traffic. It's going to have an impact on the community. So we wanted to be sure that what level of development would be acceptable to the community. So H2M, in conjunction with WSP, are conducting a build out and traffic analysis, really to take a look at, what is feasible for our downtown, and at what point is it just too much. That process will feed into any potential zoning changes and inform any potential redevelopment plans for sites that we've so designated downtown. The process has been ongoing. As everyone at this point knows, we had a significant public outreach for the re-examination process. So now there's a lot of behind the scenes activity going on through the consultants. We expect that we will have a newly adopted land use and circulation element of the master plan by April 1st of next year. The team's working very hard on that. They're under the gun to get it done. They assure me that it will be. So looks like April 1st we'll have that formal policy document adopted by the planning board.
And there will be, that will all be public. The recommendations will be made public. The results of the traffic study will be public. And that piece is what's going to inform the specifics of what's going to be on the Lord and Taylor properties. So, we're trying to be very thoughtful and very transparent about what that's going to be. So Kim, is there more?
Yes, a couple more. So we have Janet DeFiore is asking about mom and pop stores and saying that they always gave Westfield that hometown feeling. Is there a future for them, or are we doomed to only chains that can afford the rents?
Actually, Phil, why don't you, I know it's interesting because I think Morristown is an interesting example of success in mom and pops. Maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, and I think that Janet, I think it was, it's kind of hitting the nail right on the head that there is this relationship between rents, obviously, commercial landlords, and the flexibility of retail. Retail had gotten to a point in some of my projects that I've done in South Orange and Morristown where they're like, "We'll give you the retail, like we don't even want it." So there's like definitely a disconnect there, and sometimes I think that new development, you could actually use that to leverage and use the ground floor of new development to create incubators or incubator space or lower cost space where the municipality now is a partner and a player in that transaction to create better spaces. So I think that the question is like right on point. I think we need to do that. I think that we need to think about ways. One of the talking points and things that's here to stay that I have observed is the idea of curbside delivery. Like, how simple is that? And like we never did it before, and it was like, we're not going to do it. I'll just go inside to Target or whatever. Like now, like if I could just sit there and like drive up, open my window, that. So I think that downtowns will change. I hope. And I think that small businesses, like if any small business, a pizza place, anybody who's not, you can't order online, like there's no such thing anymore. Like with whoever was left kind of taking orders by phone or walk-in rest only, that now those folks have all moved to an online remote ordering system. I think supporting them in their operation to be able to do that and creating the right infrastructure to support Uber Eats, to support DoorDash, to support whatever comes next in terms of allowing the the little gift shop or whatever, Barron's Drugs, to, be part of an Uber Eats type network. So you can get deliveries and use the curbside delivery system to support everybody moving ahead. It'll be better than Amazon. It'll be faster than Amazon, and it'll be more unique and local than Amazon, and you'll feel better about doing it. So I think that if we can find ways as a community and as a state to be doing things like that in our downtowns, we should. I don't think we're doomed. I think that people have lost a lot, and that is, next to human life, like that is the next greatest tragedy here, is that families have lost their fortunes, some of them, as part of this, and that there will be a rebuilding process. But as I've said and talking to other entrepreneurs, to be an entrepreneur is somebody that knows how to start and run and operate a business. They're not a business in itself. So these people are scrappy. Like, we're New Jersey people. Like, you can't keep us down. We will thrive, and we know, and these people know how to run a business. So it's gonna take some time, but I think it might need some support from us and from the federal government and wherever we can get it from. But I have every confidence that if they were able to do it then, they're going to be able to do it again. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that they have the right space, that they have the right infrastructure, and that we as a community, quite frankly, are supporting them. Like, I get my food, all my orders, all my retail, I go to Westfield now, because it's a solidarity thing, and I think it needs to be part of our culture.
And Phil, just to pick up on a few other things too, I think as a town, we have an obligation to create an ecosystem to ensure that these small mom and pops are successful. Yes. And that ecosystem includes regular foot traffic, not just on weekends, but days and evenings. And foot traffic means office space, living, and so forth. And I also think it's really important to note is about the benefit of redevelopment designation in and of itself means that the developer is a partner with the town, and everything that we do jointly has to be approved by the town. And one of the things that Phil just mentioned, which I think was Sheena Collins in South Orange, which I thought was brilliant. And one of the redevelopment requirements of a developer, they required them to designate, I don't know what it was, 10,000 square feet of space or something specifically for small, like mom and pop retail incubators. And that's the benefit of, of a town thinking the mom, going back to the character and flavor of a community, those mom and pop stores are integral to ensuring that that's what we want. And therefore we need to make sure the town has the control to put in policies in place that's going to ensure they're successful. But we're very committed to that, and I couldn't agree with you more. Kim, one more question?
Sure. We've got Susan Edwards, who would like to know, how are towns like Cranford and Summit experiencing less vacancies than Westfield? Are they offering incentives to new businesses to open in their towns?
I'll address it specifically, and then I'll let these guys, because I speak to the mayors of both of those towns frequently. Phil is a planner in Summit, and he can speak more to it. And I actually wrote a letter to the editor about this, I think over a year ago, because it's not something that's happened in the 12 months. It's quite frankly, it's something that's been happened since the mid-90s. And Westfield was the beneficiary of having all those chain stores in town. Summit was not, because of the Short Hills Mall, and neither was Cranford, because we were here. And so we got the benefit of these chain stores, which brought natural foot traffic, which brought high rents. And while we were busy enjoying the fruits of that opportunity, Cranford and Summit were very busy on redevelopment. And hence, that's when Cranford initially built their first garage, which started the redevelopment and the multi-use development that you saw on one side of town. And that is when Summit started doing the same. So, and then by the time we became the tipping point for online shopping happened in about 2009, which was really the financial crisis, really was the tipping point for online shopping. And we were then not only in the middle of a financial crisis, but also in the middle of a change in consumer behavior, and we had not done anything proactively to make sure that we were prepared for when that happened. happened. So, and it's not something that takes place overnight. A lot of people say it's just the rent problem. The rent might be one small problem, but I'm convinced you could lower all the rents tomorrow. And in absence of fundamentally changing the foot traffic problem and our parking challenges, it's not good. I think you're going to end up with low rent tenants without funded which would not be reflective of the character of our community. So the challenge is unfortunately more long-term. It's more strategic, but it's thoughtful. But we have things that those other towns don't. We've got great bones. We've got incredible, our demographics are off the charts. We've got people who are so loyal and committed to this town, I think, and we have this incredible opportunity right in front of us to get it right. And that's what this is all about. So, so Phil, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I'm just going to say really quick, I think you hit the nail on the head in all of your points. Absenteeism is absolutely a thing in Westfield, that there are some of these towns, you have a few core property owners that have a sense of like kind of civic duty that I don't know if, I don't know the property owners as well as you all do. But the one thing I'll just say to the questioner and to everybody, I have now had the honor of serving the role of planner in a lot of communities that I've loved and I grew up in. At Morristown, Summit, South Orange, Westfield, Cranford, and everybody envies each other. Everybody thinks the other one is doing better. Everybody thinks the other place is more perfect. That why can't, in Westfield, why can't we be more like Cranford? Cranford wants to be more like Summit. Summit wants to be more like Morristown. So everybody thinks that the other one is doing better. Everybody thinks that everybody has more vacancies. It's like, when you look at your face and you hate your eyebrows, it's all you see is those eyebrows, and everybody else thinks you're beautiful. So Westfield's a beautiful place. Westfield is a healthy place. You have you have some great retail. You have some restaurants here that other people would love to get, and that are, really, really great things happening. So it'll work itself out. I wouldn't use any other town as your measuring stick. You don't have the metrics. You have to base it by numbers. And just driving down and seeing that they have full stores, doesn't tell the whole story. And we're all focused, and I know that all the people that are on in the audience are focused on the future of Westfield. So that's what we will do. And you guys are doing fine. You're doing fine by all the metrics, especially under the circumstances.
Thank you, Phil. And listen, I know we have a lot of other questions coming in, which is exciting because that means people are engaged and interested, but this is the first of many. And I would only encourage you to continue to ask questions, submit questions. And if we need to do this and feel like this is helpful to do something like this monthly, we can do that. It's really important to educate the public and also get your ideas. And, I have never, in spite of a pandemic, in spite of vacancies in town, I have never been more excited or optimistic about the future of our community. It's just, the possibilities are endless. And I think we have an incredible opportunity in front of us, and we just need to make sure we get it right. And it's funny about the retail, like I've been upset about the vacancies, but I've never panicked about the vacancies. And I've never used the vacancy rate as a measuring stick. A lot of people want to. If we were doing everything right and we still had a vacancy problem, I would be worried. But I knew that we couldn't use it as a measuring stick because we hadn't even begun the process of trying to make sure that we created an ecosystem for these businesses to be successful. So that's where we are. And I think, what I said, you fill up the streets and you're going to fill up the stores. Yes. And so our business is to fill up the streets, and with hopefully with generations of Westfield residents in the future. And we're going to rely on the public and our community to be a real driver for helping us make that happen. So thank you all very much for your participation today. Thank you for those that have tuned in, and look forward to, this is the beginning of many conversations to have, and we look forward to it. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye now.